This tank is one of the most godly vehicles in World of Tanks when it comes to DPM and getting assistance damage at tier 10. And of course, we are looking at the on-track event, so you can currently get an XP bonus towards this vehicle, which is of course an extra 25% towards grinding out this tech tree line. And that was also one of the biggest things why I wanted to do this video, and it's also the final part in our series today, which is looking at the 430, the K91 and the 430U, and we will do a full medium tank line review for the Soviet tanks at a later date, and in fact coming soon. So if you want to see which one I would pick as my favourite, you can stay tuned on the channel by subscribing, and of course like the video if you want to see that. Let me know in the comments section down below. But with all of the kind of spiel out of the way, what is this tank all about? Why do you want to actually purchase it? Because you can get it for 30% off right now, along with 30% between tiers 7 and tiers 10, and 50% off of the silver between tiers 3 and tiers 6. So it's a really good time to buy any of the previous tanks as well. Unfortunately, I've already got them all, but yeah, still. The K91, what is this tank all about? Well, as you can quite easily see, it is a rear mounted vehicle tank, which means that its turret is at the back of the tank. And what is that good for in World of Tanks? Well, it's brilliant for being able to side scrape. The only problem is this medium tank doesn't particularly have the best side armor, and by the best, I mean really that much. And as soon as you start over angling the side of this vehicle, it's only 60mm thick and can be penned by quite a lot of vehicles. And you've also got this lovely section that you can see here on the front, highlighted in yellow, that can be penned on the left and on the right hand side. And as soon as you start angling with this thing, people can just hit you there, and they can also hit your tracks at the same time and go through those to pen you through the blue section at the front, just next to the track, if that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, armor wise, in terms of its side scraping ability, it's not particularly amazing. You aren't going to be a heavy tank, but you do have the ability to side scrape. You just have to give them a very steep angle, and you want to make sure that that frontal plates that we showed in yellow are basically not available for your opponents to hit. So you want to make sure that the obstacle is far behind that plate so that you cannot be hit there if you're going to try and side scrape with this thing. The good thing about this tank, however, is that it is very, very good at dealing damage when you do find your opponent's fire, or if you catch them out, you can track the opponents, and often you can keep them locked down using some of the core mechanics in the game by going for damage and tracks at the same time. And yeah, it is really, really good at doing that, because you have a 4.91 second reload. Now that is one of the fastest firing medium tanks at tier 10 for sure, if not the fastest firing. I'm not even sure that there is very many other tanks that could do that. And of course, this isn't an autoloader, that is your actual reload time, so you can consistently deal damage at 4.9 second reload. So it's really, really good at kicking out a ton of damage really quickly and being a dominant force when you are playing this vehicle. It also gets 9 degrees of gun depression, which for a tank that is very low profile and Soviet, this is a rare occurrence. I mean, it is not common. And although this tank gets 9 degrees of gun depression, I have a funny feeling that over the front of the vehicle you do not get 100% of that 9 degrees of gun depression. I will just double check for you whilst we have a look at some other aspects of this tank. Now, accuracy wise, 0.26 accuracy is really, really good, and that allows you to essentially pinpoint those weak points super quickly. The aim time of 1.72 seconds, very good as well, and the penetration on the standard rounds, 276. Yeah, 276, which means firing premium in this tank is not always your best bet. And because it's heat rounds as your premium round, it definitely isn't always the best bet, because what happens when you start firing heat rounds is that it can be absorbed by some of the vehicles that you'll be facing, which is of course a bit of a problem. So if you're coming up against tracks, etc., then yeah, it's not ideal. So you want to be firing a lot of that APCR rounds, the standard rounds. That's why I got a 50-50. Of course, heat is very good, 330 pen, and can pen a lot of those heavily armoured vehicles if you're looking at things like, for example, the E100, the MAUs. Those tanks are perfect rounds to be fired with the heat rounds. And we're going to see two amazing gameplays. But first, let's have a look at the equipment setup. I'm running it with advanced optics for increased view range, because we want to get some assistance from spotting. We've got loading time decrease, which means we can fire faster and we can boost up the DPM as much as possible. And we've also gone with improved ventilation, since we don't need the accuracy from the gun stabilizer, since it's more than accurate to be able to deal with a lot of tanks in the game. So improved ventilation makes this thing a little bit better in a lot of different areas. Am I saying that it is the most optimal build for this vehicle? Probably. It's definitely up in the air. I mean, it's a good equipment slot, but if I was to swap anything out, it would probably be ventilation. You could even run advanced concealment for a true spotting build with this tank. You could run gun stabilizer. You could also go for the option of that speed boost to get into position quickly, because although this tank is fast, 55 kilometers an hour, it doesn't have the most outrageous horsepower to ton ratio, 19. It's not awful, but it is a little bit sluggish in some situations. So just bear that in mind when you are playing this tank and thinking about purchasing this one or going for it. But it is definitely worth the while. Now, I said I was going to look at the gun depression. I have, and indeed I was correct. The gun depression over the front of this vehicle is 5 degrees, which is as you'd expect from most of these Soviet tanks. But as soon as you go slightly off from the tracks, for example, at this angle, if your turret was looking directly at the screen right now, it's really hard to kind of show within this game from the garage, if that makes sense. I don't have a mouse, but essentially if you were looking straight forward from this sort of angle, you have 9 degrees of gun depression. So when you're going towards people, always make sure that you do angle, and that is going to give you an increased chance of bouncing. And also after you've fired, you can then twist so that you keep wobbling your tank like this. It's just going to increase the chances of you bouncing, and that is what you want from a tank like this. You want to bounce those random rounds every now and again, and you never know, it might hit the heavily armored part of the turret. You just don't know. So doing that is going to increase your chances of that, and hopefully you'll be able to deal a little bit more damage or survive a little bit longer. So that's how the K91 plays. We are also making sure that we put camo on this vehicle, since the 3% extra concealment will help you out, and it will enable you to spot more and not get spotted as easily. Running full premium consumables, as always. You can drop out the enhanced med kit for just a standard one, and then I would, if I was trying to save even more money, I would drop out the enhanced repair kit for a normal one. And then if you really wanted to play the budget build, which I don't recommend, I would drop out the enhanced rations. I would 100% on all of your tanks be running enhanced rations. As a starter for 10, I would never run fire extinguisher. I'm sorry to say, but fire extinguisher is a bit of a trap. A lot of the times, yes, you can get set on fire. Trust me, it's annoying when you get set on fire, but the amount of times you're going to get set on fire is minimal. I mean, even when they're hitting your engine, you've got a 25% chance to be set on fire. Now, being a front-mounted tank, you can see the module, the engine is in the front, so it can be annoying. But at the same time, for the most part, it's not the worst in the world. It can get set on fire, but obviously we are going for the optimal build. We want an all-round build, and so I'm not going to be ever running fire extinguisher in any of my tanks, which is why I've got 254 spare fire extinguishers and of course 633 fire extinguishers as the standard consumable. So just a word of advice, I would always run enhanced combat rations or enhanced rations if I am going to be playing any vehicle in the game. I mean, I can just literally look through any vehicle in the game right now and they all have enhanced rations. None of them will have just the standard kind of fire extinguisher or premium fire extinguisher. It's just not what is optimal, and it will actually be a little bit of a trap, and it will make you worse in almost every way. Why? Because the enhanced rations boost up the crew performance by 15% when you're using it, which boosts the view range, it boosts your reload, it boosts your kind of aim time, your accuracy. Literally the entirety of the tank gets so much better when you're actively using it. And even when you're not actively using it, you get a 10% boost to crew performance, which is huge. And that is just the passive boost. And then when you apply the active boost, you get a further 15%. So effectively, overall, you're going to be 25% better when you are using it with the active boost. And active boost is just when you press B in the game, or whatever control you have your consumable on, it will activate. It lasts, I think, in the region of like 15 seconds or something like that. I mean, it shows you a timer at the bottom of the screen, and then of course once it's off that, you got a minute cooldown to be able to replenish the boost, and then you can use it again. So really good piece of advice, and this tank will definitely benefit the most from having that. Now, with all that out of the way, I think we've done enough of the talking about the K91. I think it's time to actually jump into some gameplay and hopefully show you how this thing can be very good in the game, but also why there are a few drawbacks compared to some of the other medium tanks, as you can probably assume given the fact that it is a rear mounted vehicle. Now then, shifting straight over into the gameplay, we have the first replay, which is showcasing the K91 on El Alamein, and this one is really important for you guys to understand how this tank can have a huge ceiling where you can deal a ton of damage, but it also has some problems that you'll start facing if you're wanting to push, you know, the plus 10,000 damage mark, and that is primarily down to the fact that there isn't that many rounds. I mean, when you look at it, on the face of it, it has 50 rounds, and when you're dealing 300 plus damage per round, you have a maximum damage ceiling of 15,000 damage. But of course, in World of Tanks, you don't hit every single one of your shells, so as soon as you start missing a few, you start ending up being very limited on ammunition. And because this fires so fast, and because you're constantly going to be wanting to go for tracks as well as damage at the same time, sometimes you'll end up only tracking, sometimes you'll bounce, etc., and that can be a real problem for this vehicle. But what isn't a problem for this vehicle is the fast moving vehicles, because of the fact that those standard rounds are of course APCR. And that means that from a distance, when you're fighting light tanks, you're going to be able to be pretty strong, and they're not really going to have any problems. Well, you're not going to have any problems with those light tanks when they're moving away from you. So it's really nice from that perspective. Now, you see me load a heat round for the E100. We're trying to get some damage on him. We've got a Skoda T56 who's coming from the side. We just launch a speculative shot, and this is what you have to do sometimes to be able to get some damage. Now, I don't know what was going on there, but apparently a little bit of lag within the recording software. But we have, of course, now got a Dragon. There's lots of vehicles in the center. Looks like their team are taking the northern and northeastern side of the map, or that's where they're really trying to push. Now we have an E100 that's pulling out, and this is the problem with the heat rounds. Like I said in the intro to this video, you do have problems when loading those heat rounds. I was hoping I'd just be able to pen. I was aiming for the above where the spaced armor is on the E100, but still didn't manage to land exactly where I wanted it, and so we swapped straight back to the APCR. We don't want to bounce any more rounds, and we managed to finish him off there. So although we've only picked up 800 damage, we picked up a tank out of the game, which is nice, and it's one of those big boys that's going to be able to deal a ton of damage. Now, because I am a top tier in a pretty decent matchup, we're going to want to push, and by pushing I mean we want to make sure that we're not doing anything stupid, whilst also being able to get over to this position where you're starting to see me go, because what we can do from here is spot for the team as well as get some nice shells, and it opens up a position where we're able to kind of see where the enemy team are on this flank. You can spot them, you can basically deal damage from here. Now we see that there is a WZ-111 Quillin. No one is on this center ridge where I was maybe thinking that there might have been someone literally directly in front from here. And luckily there isn't, because that position is quite a defensible one if they do manage to get there, and you know, we push to where we are. Now you can get hit from the center if you do go here, so making sure that you've won the center like we have is going to give this position a much better chance at winning. And what we can do here is set up a nice little crossfire to find some of the opponents that are going to be sat in their base. Now this game has been super slow, but what you'll find with the K91 is sometimes these slower games can develop into crazy ones where you start just being an absolute nightmare for the opponents you're facing. Now we see that there's a Hawk. I end up pre-aiming where he's going to be, and we land another one. Now can we land the final one in between the building here? No, I fired a bit too late and we don't manage to hit it, but we definitely could have done if we did get a little bit lucky. We managed to land a shot there. Don't quite know how that happened. There's a light tank now coming from behind. Not quite sure what he's doing, but we do get the server delay, so our round actually comes out slightly sideways. But that's mainly just because I was not going to be able to hit him anyway, but the server side reticle, of course, isn't actually on console, so you only get a client side. So if you move too quickly, the reticle has time to actually catch up, and so it isn't always exactly where you're aiming, which is why you're seeing me here aim slightly to the right of where these opponents are and still manage to aim exactly where I want to be. So you'll get used to this in the game. Unfortunately, we have no option to turn on a server side reticle, which sucks. I know it is annoying, but at the same time we are hoping that we can you know, get that in the future. Maybe we'll see it, maybe we won't. You're seeing me here go for the tracking shot on the WZ. We know his reload's about 9 seconds, so we might be able to get another one in, but I didn't want to risk it there, so we kind of rush it to get one in. Now, Somua, dangerous tank. Skoda T56, dangerous tank. Draugen, dangerous tank. Lynx, definitely not a dangerous tank, but if we can get him out, he'll stop spotting us and therefore, you know, open us up to getting a little bit more damage. Now, I get spotted. I know that Somua was over here. That's exactly where he was. We fire it. We blind fire him and get a bit of damage there. Now, I try and go for the auto aim. Forgot that there's a rock in between, so bad choice by me. Then we decide to push down here. We go for the damage, but only end up tracking him because, of course, why not? And then we find ourselves a little Stritz. This is where you can spread about that damage so easily in the game and have some really crazy results as the damage starts racking up. And you can see that here, picking up 4,000 damage so far with a little bit of assistance, 36. I mean, it's nothing to write home about, but this tank can definitely spot for its team, as long as, of course, you're not trying to spot light tanks with incredible camo or TDs that are sat in a bush with incredible camo as well. Now, Link 6x6, of course, trying to go. We do land another one into him, and then we pre-aim the cross where we're expecting him to try and cross, and we managed to take him out. Easy as you like. Obviously, when you're playing in World of Tanks, if you see an opponent trying to make a play and you know where they're probably going to be, the best thing to do isn't to track them as they move, it's just to pre-aim the actual place where you think that they're going to be. So that's exactly what we do. And we get a little bit of damage for it. We go for a speculative shot there on the Draugen, not a problem if we don't manage to hit him. Now, this Draugen is in the Chile clan, which is a pretty sweaty clan for World of Tanks. At least from my own experience of playing up against them. I have no idea if this is a good player or not, but you know, he's having a little bit of trouble here to be able to hit us reliably. We missed that one because we haven't got any APCR rounds left because we've ran out of them, which is where, you know, the heat rounds can be a little bit disappointing since you don't have the shell velocity of those APCR rounds. And what do I mean by that? Well, the shells just don't travel as far or as fast as you might like. But we're still on full hit points and we've done 5,000 damage. This is the position you want to be. And this allows us to do something like this, where we poke an SU-130. I know I'm going to take a hit. Of course, we go for the damage here by going for the turret with the HE rounds, and we miss because, yay, but we're not going to miss that last one, and we managed to shut him down in 2 shots. So that's where the HE rounds come in really nicely for vehicles like the Waffle Panzer IV, for vehicles like the SU-130 PM, and that's going to give us the best result possible and allow us to get even more damage. We've done 6,000 so far, and there is, of course, this WZ that's down by me. So we're going to go up from behind him. Obviously, going from behind, he's not going to have any armor. Looks like he's coming back this way, at least from my perspective. But we'll soon find out. I can take multiple hits from this guy, and we'd have to play extremely bad to not be able to take him out. We stop here. we aim, we put one into the back of him, and then all we have to do is get one more into him. There we go, a nice little one. We set his engine on fire. He doesn't aim properly and we don't even take a hit here. And then of course I aim for the spaced armor on the side, which you don't want to do. You want to aim between the tracks and the actual side armor of the Quillen, much like you will do with some of the Soviet tanks. You don't want to hit that spaced armor on the side, especially with the heat rounds. If we had APCR, I'm sure it would have probably gone through, but you know, that's as it is. But we got 6,700 damage, and we're trying to chase down wherever this tortoise is, or the badger even, in this game. And it's a TD, it's somewhere in the map, we have no idea where he actually is, and so I'll skip forward to the point at which we actually find the badger, and then I'll catch up with you there. Now then, the badger does eventually get spotted right here, and he's next to our base, because of course no one's managed to spot him. But what we do from here is we start pushing towards him. I'm begging the people in the cap circle to get out, and there you go, someone actually gets out. I put thank you, affirmative, brilliant, good game. Someone else puts good game. Thank you very much to whoever was in the cap for actually getting out. Of course, it wasn't the light tank in the cap circle that got out, it was the heavy tank. Brilliant. Nice to see the light tank wanting to get more XP in this game rather than just cap. Oh wait. Anyway, we do manage to put one into him. We're going for the tracking shot at the beginning on this guy. We're also getting the damage in that lower plate. The heat rounds are perfect for that. 330 pens, more than enough. And I can just sit in front of the badger. I have the hit points. There's no point in trying to avoid it because we might miss out on some damage. But in this game, we pick up over 8,000 combined damage, coming second on the team to the Tornvang B, or the Tornvang Black, who manages to pick up 3,000 damage. So yeah, very interesting. But we do manage to have a brilliant game in the K91. It is possible to have games like this. It is a fantastic vehicle for sure. And yeah, a mastery for no surprise, really, picking up a ton of damage. But that's not the only thing in today's video. Let's jump into the next one. Now then, the next one is a very quick one, so I won't hold you for very much longer in today's video. And if you have watched so far, please do think about liking the video, as it massively helps me out and it's the biggest thing you can do right now. And it doesn't cost you anything, don't worry, I'm not wargaming. But more importantly, this game is of course going to be showing what this tank can do on a more heavy oriented map, where you have to use this tank as a bit of an opportunist and use it to come out with a decent result. Now this game does not go how you would hope it would go. I mean, I don't come out with anywhere near as much damage as we had in the previous game. There's not that many opportunities on a kind of town map for you to be able to do it, certainly not as easily anyway. And unfortunately we are bouncing off of the 277 here. But don't worry, we might get a shot into him later on. But you can see me here just trying to get a shot, and this is where that 5 degrees of gun depression over the front of the vehicle can be annoying, as opposed to the 9 degrees that you get on the side. But for some reason this 277 keeps poking me. There's a lot of teammates in support who are in a better position. You can see them moving up to A3. It's a really good counter for tanks like this 277, and a lot of people don't use that position when you see people going here. So it's a good one that you can use. The teammates use it quite well here. But we do shut down that 277, which is nice, and finish him off. Now you're seeing here we're being, as I said, opportunistic. You can't play this thing like a traditional brawling heavy tank. It has to be played like that opportunistic sniper, and sniper in name only. I don't mean you're sat at the back of the map trying to snipe people for 300 damage. I'm on about, you know, just making sure that you keep your gun locked and loaded at one side and you are just picking off opponents where you can find them. Now I take an aggressive play here. I say aggressive, you know, it's just the generic play that you should probably make at this point. There's not many people over here. There's a tortoise here who is on the side. We go for a shot, hopefully to get one into him. He then fires and misses. I'm assuming he was going for the TD that's behind me. But at this point, once again, just trying to progress the game, and I want to be the furthest forward so I can at least get some damage in this game, since it's not looking all too good for the enemy team. So what do? Well, we go up here and we find ourselves trying to side scrape. Now the tortoise does fire here, and we know the weak points of the tortoise. I lose a bit of time there where we probably didn't need to take that hit as easily, and this is the point at which the K91's very, very good. The tortoise is of course trying to hit us, and he's resulted to firing HE. Don't quite know why you do that up against the K91, but this is the heat rounds coming in very nicely. I mean, the 330 pen is easy to go through the tortoise, and it's kind of one of those things where I feel pretty bad for doing it, but we push up now. Maybe we'll take a hit of damage, which we do. I'm not surprised. It is a aggressive kind of push here, but once we're here now, we have the option to try and get in a little bit more damage against some of these opponents. And more importantly, what we can do is, if we can push to the next hill, take our spot when we can start dealing damage to things like this AMX-65T, like the medium who's pushed up to the corner where he's fighting with our medium tank, and as soon as we get there we can just basically collapse the entire game and we just end up winning. But what we're seeing here is just, you know, keeping ourselves pretty healthy. We don't want to lose any more health unnecessarily. Yes, you might take a few rounds in this thing, but overall you want to keep yourself to the end of the game, because much like light tanks or much like autoloaders, this tank can become super deadly in the end game of World of Tanks because of that reload. You're super quick at reloading. You pretty much have better DPM than most vehicles in the game, so you don't have anything to worry about there. We don't actually aim our shot as well as we should have done on that list, but we do finish him off with the next one just 4 seconds later, so not too bad at all. We go for a bit of a speculative shot on the LT. We do find ourselves up against the SU, and this is where, if you push to this position or you get into here, this is where the game just starts snowballing and the enemy team have collapsed. You know, it was fairly even up until the point we pushed the tortoise, and then their team just started to collapse because they've got so many different fronts, and of course there's so many targets for every single one of our teammates to hit, that yeah, they're going to struggle quite badly. But we do manage to land a few. We then actually aim against the T-77 there, because if we let him survive he could clip us out if we then bounce or something ridiculous. So we finish him off, and now it's just artillery and the medium tank left alive. So we go after him, put one into him. Will this Barask hit me? He does, but he actually hits the upper plate and ends up bouncing. Unfortunately gets hit by artillery and yeah, loses a bit of hit points that we would have loved to have got. I decide not to fire and we just ram him for the rest of the damage in the game, picking up over 5,000 combined on a pretty heavy map, and one that you don't typically see people pushing on, but if you do push on this map it can be really rewarding and come away with games like this, as opposed to, you know, sitting at the back trying to snipe for the whole game and ending up with 2,000 damage, and probably ending up making the game a hell of a lot harder for your team, as they're having to deal with people that are just camping on the enemy team on the ridges with their hold down vehicles, whereas we force them to have to move and open themselves up to more shots. So yeah, a really good, nice game there. I thought it showed a little bit of extra of the K91 other than the damage potential, and hopefully you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to like the video once again, and I will see you in the next one. Stay tuned, have a great weekend and have a great weekday, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.